This is chapter 16, and it is called Sitting on a Time Bomb. My aunt and uncle were gone, and Aunt Queenie had left a note telling me she'd be at the athletic field, of all places, until early afternoon. Probably checking all the fence posts to make sure they're all in line, I muttered, tossing her note aside. I knew I'd have to face her sometime, but it was a relief not to have to look at her this morning. She was bound to be mad about the fit I'd thrown the night before. Well, let her be mad. That'd make two of us. After breakfast, I scribbled a note of my own. Punky's with me. Feeling smug, I stuck it on the refrigerator. I'd left out the details on purpose. I told Punky we were going visiting, which was the wrong thing to say. He took great pains shaving and perfuming himself, wash ragging his spiky hair, and packing his jelly bean lunchbox. Finally, he put on his red jacket and rammed his cowboy hat down over his ears, and we were ready to go. We walked to Avanel's, where Bertie, Randolph, and Eddie were waiting for us on the porch. "Clown here," said Punky, tousling Eddie's hair as he scooted in between Eddie and Bertie on the steps. Eddie responded to Punky's teasing by crossing his eyes and pulling on his ears. "You're a clown," said Punky. Bertie giggled. "You're a clown, too," Punky tweeted her curly mop. Randolph hadn't said a word, but his eyes were enormous when he saw all the treasures in Punky's lunchbox. 1, 2, 3, 4, Punky counted, taking out his clowns and animals and lighting them up at his feet. "We can play pet store," squealed Bertie. "Or zoo," said Eddie. "Let's have a zoo." "Yeah, buddy," replied Punky. I could see he was in good hands, so I crossed the porch and tapped on the door. "Come in," Avenel yelled from somewhere at the back of the house. I found her in the kitchen, where she was up to her elbows in soap suds. "Pull out a chair and sit down beside it," she said with a grin. "I'll be done in a minute." "Hi, Del Rita," Mrs. Shackelford called from a bedroom, where she was dressing Gordy. I sat down and glanced around, but there was no sign of Tree. Maybe he slept late on Saturdays. "Do you like parades?" asked Avenel. Her question surprised me, and I said, "Well, sure. Doesn't everybody?" "Why?" "The high school's homecoming parade is this afternoon. If you want, we can take Punky and all the kids to see it." Suddenly, the cereal I'd had for breakfast rolled into a knot in my stomach. Mom and Dad had taken us to see lots of parades, but we'd always gone early enough to get a good parking spot and watch from the car. I didn't like the idea of Punky standing on the street with a mob. "I don't know," I said, searching for an excuse. "Punky gets too excited. He might get sick." Automatically, I touched the bulge in my pocket that was Punky's bottle of nitroglycerin pills. Avenel pulled the plug in the sink and reached for a dish towel. "It can't be any more exciting than going to Silver Dollar City," she began. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's okay." I heard peals of laughter coming from the front porch, and in an instant I knew I would take Punky to the parade. Why shouldn't he get to go see it? Besides, I thought darkly, Aunt Queenie was going to throw him to the lions soon enough. At least today, I'd be there to defend him. Avenel led me down the hall, and I saw that there were only 2 bedrooms in the house, and Tree wasn't in either one. I didn't have the nerve to ask where he might be. In Avenel's room, the 2 double beds were old and sagging, but they were covered neatly in faded handmade quilts. I thought how much friendlier a quilt would be than the slick pink coverlet I had at Aunt Queenie's. Avenel's curtains had seen better days, but they let in the sunshine as Aunt Queenie's custom-made draperies never would. We sat down cross-legged on one of those beds, and I told Avenel about Aunt Queenie's decision. Maybe it won't be so bad, she said. I've seen a lot of handicapped people, and they seem to have a good time wherever they are. You've been to the workshop? No, but in St. Louis, I've been to their practice sessions for Special Olympics. I've helped out here a couple of times on Saturday. They're always needing huggers. Huggers? Avenel laughed. Sure, huggers hug everybody. If it's softball, you hug anybody who gets a hold of the bat. If it's track, you hug anybody who crosses the finish line, even the very last one. I couldn't imagine Punky playing ball or running track. Not Punky, whose physical activity consisted of swinging and switching channels. But I was curious about Special Olympics, so I asked, how'd you find out about the hugging? From Tree. He and some of the other guys teach the handicapped people how to shoot baskets and stuff. That's where he's at now, at the athletic field. The athletic field. Aunt Queenie's note. Your aunt's a hugger, said Avenel. Didn't you know? No, I said, finding it hard to believe. Aunt Queenie struck me as someone who would be barking out orders and keeping score. The morning passed quickly as Avenel and I discussed everything from rock singers to what to wear to the football game next Friday. Every so often, I glanced out the window to check on Punky. Once, I saw him singing to a real audience of Bertie and her two brothers. When he finished his song, the boys clapped and Bertie blew her whistle. Another time, I was amazed to see Punky clamp his precious cowboy hat on Randolph's head as Randolph rode the porch rail like a bucking bronco. There were only 6 chairs at the Shacklefords' table, counting Gordy's high chair, so at lunchtime, Avenel and I had to stand up. I asked Punky to give her his seat, but she shook her head, saying, I'm used to it. Tree always beats me to the chair, then tells me I can eat more standing up. Big brothers are a pain. I pictured her and Tree fighting for the chair and grinned. It felt good to be crowded around a table with a real, honest-to-goodness family. After lunch, Mrs. Shackelford put Gordy down for a nap and sent the rest of us off to the parade. As we traipsed across the McDonald's parking lot, Punky said, Look, clown, and pointed to a poster of Ronald McDonald in the restaurant window. Yes, replied Randolph. He's coming next month. Here? I asked. It's their anniversary celebration, said Avenel. He's going to put on a magic show. By then, we were at the street, which was lined with people on both sides as far as I could see. The 6 of us drew a lot of stares as Punky bellied us through the crowd to a position in the front row. When he was satisfied with our location, he stuck his hand out to an old man and said, Hi, buddy, parade! The old man was wearing an army coat and stretched tight across his shoulders and a cap with a VFW insignia, Veterans of Foreign War. Quickly, he switched his cane to his left hand and shook hands with Punky. That's right, son, he replied. I'd be in it, too, if I didn't have a bad leg. Someone snorted, and I looked down the row and met the eyes of a preppy-looking fellow seated on the curb. His tanned, hairy legs stuck out in the street, and he was sporting Reeboks with hot pink half socks. To no one in particular, but loud enough so I could hear, he said, A general and a retard. This should be a good show. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I was barely aware that Avenel had grabbed my arm and was whispering, Don't pay attention to him. I shot the loud mouth a dirty look, and he looked back at me with an expression that was frightening. A siren sounded in the distance. signaling that the parade was on its way. Punky clapped his hands and chuckled, but by then the crowd's attention had shifted away from him down the street. A police car rolled toward us slowly, its red light flashing and its siren silent. Behind the car marched 4 old men in military uniforms and VFW caps, their faces solemn as they escorted the stars and stripes. The parade was still half a block away when Punky snatched his cowboy hat from his head and held it over his heart. As the flag inched toward us, the guy with the pink socks remained seated on the curb. Punky strode over to him, jerked a thumb upward and said, "Up, dummy!" Children giggled and stared while grown-ups shuffled uncomfortably. The young man gawked at Punky, but didn't move. Pointing down the street, Punky said, "The flag! Up!" The fellow glanced around and saw that all eyes were on him. With a strangled laugh, he leaped to his feet. "Okay," said Punky. He stepped back into place beside the general, who winked at him, and together they snapped a salute as Old Glory passed. "Wow," whispered Avenel. "That guy came off that curb like a puppet being jerked on a string." I nodded, feeling weak in the knees, as at the close call. What if that loudmouth had refused to get up? What would Punky have done then? A chill passed through me at the thought that Punky might lock horns with a scary stranger at the sheltered workshop. We watched the Tanglewood High School band and drill team, the floats, and the convertible car carrying the homecoming queen and her court. A tractor passed, hauling a wagon full of people wearing red sweatshirts and waving furiously. "They're from the sheltered workshop," said Avenel. "See their Special Olympic shirts?" My mouth gaped open. I hadn't known there were that many handicapped people around Tanglewood. I glanced quickly toward the preppy fellow, expecting him to call out an insult, but he had disappeared into the crowd. After the parade, we went back to Avenel's house, which was filled with the tantalizing smell of chocolate. As I stood at the table eating warm brownies, I wished Punky and I had never had to return to Uncle Bert and Aunt Queenie's, but it was almost 3 o'clock, and I knew we'd better be going. I wanted us to be invited back again, so it wouldn't do to wear out our welcome. Punky and I said our goodbyes and left. Every step of the way, I dreaded having to face Aunt Queenie. She was waiting for us as we entered the front door. Her bun so ratty and lopsided it perched on her head like an abandoned bird nest. "Where have you been?" she demanded, tearing off her sunglasses to reveal white-rimmed raccoon eyes on her wind-burned face. Kids, play," said Punky, sliding past her on his way to the family room. I couldn't answer. I was too shocked at seeing her in a Special Olympics sweatshirt and blue jeans. "What kids? Where?" asked Aunt Queenie. She folded her arms and tapped her foot, which I was staring at because it was a scuffy old tennis shoe. "We went to the Shacklefords," I said. "I left you a note." "Some note! You didn't say where you were going or when you'd be back. Didn't you think that Bert and I might worry? He's driving all over town right now, searching for you and half scared to death that Punky's had a heart attack." I'm sorry," I said. "Sorry won't get it, Del Rita. I've been holding back because of all the trauma you've been through. But this is the last straw. If we're going to be responsible for you, we deserve a little consideration and respect." By supper time, Aunt Queenie had put on a dress and makeup and slicked her hair back into the lacquered bun. Miss Perfect, I thought. As I set the silverware on the table, with the handles exactly 1 inch from the edge, I managed to choke down half a baked potato and some meatloaf before the lecture started. Del Rita, said Aunt Queenie, in view of your behavior last night, I believe your taking Punky and staying gone all day was a deliberate attempt to punish Bert and me. You must have been delighted when you came home and found us crazy with worry. I squirmed in my seat and didn't answer, knowing that the note I'd left had been purposely vague. I'm glad you're getting to know the Shacklefords, but I refuse to let a 13-year-old child rule my household, Aunt Queenie continued. From now on, young lady, I expect you to ask permission before you leave the house. I could feel her eyes boring into me as I sawed away at my meatloaf. Well, I declare, said Aunt Queenie to the ceiling, this girl, who has had plenty to say last night, is using the silent treatment now. Uncle Bert cleared his throat and said, Speak up, Del Rita. What do you have to say for yourself? I looked him straight in the eye. It wouldn't make a dime's worth of difference what I say. You two will do what you want with Punky and me. Uncle Bert folded his hands on the table and studied them. For a moment, seeing the pain in his eyes, I thought he was going to stand up to Aunt Queenie. Then he said, I loved my sister dearly, but now she's gone, and it's up to Queenie and me to make the decisions. You've grown up in Punky's shadow. We want you to stop hiding behind him and lead a normal life. We want him to have something that every person needs, a feeling of worth. And the workshop will take care of all of that? I said dryly. Poof! Like magic, Punky's got a job and Del Rita Jensen's the most popular girl in school. Well, I declare, Del Rita, said Aunt Queenie, I think at your age you'd want your own interests outside of these four walls. I think you'd want to do things without Punky once in a while. The workshop is a step in that direction, and Uncle Bert, it'll make you both a bit more independent. Besides that, added Aunt Queenie, it's not like we're sending Punky away. No, I thought, that will be the next step. Ship him off to a state hospital, lock him up and throw away the key. I was still upset the next day when the preacher announced from the pulpit that Punky was going to work at the sheltered workshop. At the end of the service, he prayed, Lord, give this young man a new lease on life. Help him to find satisfaction and self-esteem in hard work. In Jesus' name, amen. Bang, said Punky, and laughter rippled through the church. I escaped to the car, leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. Someone tapped on the window and asked, Need some company? Before I could answer, Tree opened the door and slid in beside me, bringing with him that same spicy scent of my dad's aftershave. I take it you're not thrilled about Punky getting a job, he said. I shook my head. Because you think people will make fun of him? Yes. The ones who do will be the losers. Then there are a lot of losers out there, I replied. The real losers are the ones who don't get to know Punky at all, said Tree. He crossed his arms and the sun glinted on the wiry red hairs. Remember that day when he told me I had clown hair? He's so honest. It's a cinch he's not out to impress anybody. With Punky, you never have to wonder where you stand. He chuckled and added, Avenel told me about the guy at the parade. That's my point. It's like sitting on a time bomb, not knowing when he's going to offend someone or what the reaction will be. Think of all the trouble he could get into. But most people aren't cruel to someone who's different. How could you know that? You haven't been with Punky every day of your life like I have. You haven't seen what goes on. No, replied Tree, riveting me back with his eyes. But I know what it's like to be different. How many kids do you know have a father in prison? I, I, hadn't you wondered about my dad? Why he's never around? Bertie told me weeks ago when I went to your house to pick up the math book. I never told a soul, not even your own mother, nagged a voice inside me. All at once, the spicy smell became overpowering, and I heard Mom telling Dad to go easy on the aftershave. Tears sprang into my eyes, and I turned away from Tree. You've known all along? He asked. Is that why you haven't come to a game? Because I'm a jailbird's son? No. I I've always been a loner. I've never been comfortable around other people because of Punky. I felt sick. This was the first time I'd admitted the truth to anybody but myself. Sheesh, you're just like Heaven now, Tree said, rolling his eyes. You're both miserable because you've got something to hide. Sometimes the best way to tackle a problem is to meet it head on. That's what I did when I came here. I told the whole football team about my dad. It was better than worrying every second that they would find out. But, what did they do? They all stared at me for a minute. Then a couple of guys slapped me on the back and said, That's too bad, man. And then Coach asked if we were going to have a hen party or play football. That's it? That's it. Your situation doesn't compare to Punky's, I argued. Anybody'd think twice before crossing you. You're built like a tank. The car door swung open and Punky said gruffly, Hey, you, that's my girl. Tree's eyes lit up with mischief and he slid across the seat and threw his arm around me. I say she's my girl. She's my girl, you old goat. Scram! Replied Punky, jerking his thumb westward. Tree laughed, scooted back across the seat, and climbed out of the car. Built like a tank, she says. But look who gets the girl. I watched him go as Punky crawled in beside me and slammed the door. I was limp as a dish rag, and I could still feel the weight of Tree's freckled arms across my back. When Aunt Queenie got to the front seat, she wrinkled her nose and fanned the air, saying, I declare, Del Rita, what are you wearing? It smells like a perfume factory in here.